A radio show like no other. It's Brian Kilmeade.
So as I mentioned, we 75 basis points today. I said the next meeting could well be about a decision between 50 and 75. That would put us at the end of the July meeting, in that range in that more normal range, and that's a desirable place to be because you begin to have more optionality there about the speed with which you would proceed going forward. If things are better, we don't need to do that much. And if they're not, then we either do that much or possibly even more.
Optionality, that's a word I was not thinking of using ever. Jerome Powell, him yesterday, chairman of the Fed, raising rates 0.75 basis points, first time and the biggest gain since 1994. And the market liked it yesterday. They seem to hate it today. And people were cheering it yesterday. I guess those people weren't trying to buy a house. Brian Rotella is with us now, attorney, founder, and CEO, and senior partner of Genco Legal. Hey, Brian, welcome back.
Thanks, Brian. Very glad to be back.
What did the Fed do? Did the Fed help or hurt yesterday? Kind of do what's necessary, it seems.
We've got to stop this inflation. I mean, nobody's going to cry for lawyers or doctors, but I'm a lawyer and I represent doctors. We can't retain people, Brian. The salaries are getting out of control because people are having to buy stuff. So it's becoming a cycle because when you're out looking for a lawyer, you're out looking for a doctor, part of the reason that you're having a lot of waits and not being able to get in and see people or your people aren't being responsive is directly related to this inflation. It is hitting us as far as being able to retain talent.
Right.
People are jumping, but it's hitting us on retaining, so they've got to do something.
Even lawyers and doctors.
Even lawyers and doctors.
I thought that might be immune to it.
And no one's going to cry for no one's going to cry for us, but at the same point, you need lawyers and doctors to do some professional services. And it ultimately hits the patient and it hits the client because what's the number one thing that they care about? They don't want to be ignored. And doctors and lawyers are feeling like they're ignoring their patients and clients because we aren't able to keep people.
Right. So tell me about what's going on with healthcare and what we should look for. We're all focused on oil and gas and refineries. And, of course, everyone wants to drive and go on vacation, see, what air travel is going to be like, why our food costs so much because diesel prices are up, and how's our food being delivered to supermarkets through trucks? I get it. But along the way, you focus on healthcare. What should we keep our eye on?
I wrote a piece back in 2016 about the big Obamacare bubble. My admission here, I was wrong. I was 6 years late. Didn't know what was going to happen, which we are in a bubble right now, which is when they did the American Recovery Plan or whatever it was last year.
When the president first got in, he passed $1.9 trillion.
Right, and part of that $1.9 trillion was just a massive juicing of what are called subsidies that went into the Obamacare exchanges. It used to be for people only up to 400% of the poverty line. That was like $50,000 for an individual, about $104,000 for a family of four. So what happens? Now, people are getting subsidies that make a family of four making $265,000 a year. They're getting $7,800 from the government, from the taxpayer, for health care. They don't need it. They're getting it.
Right.
They're using it. Well, what's that doing? It's inflating the cost of health care. This expires, Brian, in January of 2023. Well, what's happening in November? Well, everyone's talking about it's going to be a different
It's going to be a red wave, it looks like.
It's going to be a red wave, so what's going to happen?
They're not going to renew that.
They're not going to renew it, and all of a sudden you've got $30 billion that has been pumped into the Obamacare exchanges going away. That's going to have an impact.
Right, and it's things that people need, necessary.
Things that people need, and now the healthcare cost is up here, and it's like the housing market. What happens when it resets?
I think it's amazing in 6 months. If you told somebody their interest rates were going up, they'd begin to panic. Now the market yesterday said, thank goodness the interest rates are going up. But can you, Brian Rotella, to let me know, what are the ripple effects of a rise in interest rates?
A rise in interest rates has so many ripple effects. And the ripple effect, I can just speak to in healthcare. When you move up interest rates in healthcare, what are you doing? Well, anyone who has a mortgage, anybody who's paying interest rates on credit cards, you are paying more for that. Ultimately, what do people end up not doing? They're not paying on health care. What's the number one crisis no one's talking about, Brian, that came out of this pandemic? People delayed going and getting essential care. Things like colonoscopies, things that people need to get. Why?
Well, I'll tell you what, Brian, not only did they delay it, they were told not to come.
Exactly.
Because they were told those so-called elective surgeries should stop.
Yeah, it was government actually mandated that you couldn't go in. And so now you've got people who have delayed important preventive care didn't get it, and now they can't. They're going to say, am I going to be choosing between paying that deductible and with these interest rates going up, we're going to have a sicker and sicker country that's good for nobody.
You know, a lot of people say, look, healthcare, it does really hit everybody, but to a degree when it happens. So thankfully, if you don't have a problem, you're not really thinking about healthcare. If no one in your family's in hospital, and we hope that's the case everywhere, you're not thinking about it. One thing that's hitting everybody is inflation. You mentioned about job rotation and retention. Here's what Britt Hume, who's been around, cut 13.
There's nothing that we can see now that would give us any reason to hope that inflation will subside between now and the midterms, which are just a few months away. So it looks like that's going to be a burden around their neck.
Do you think so?
Yeah.
In Florida especially.
Especially, I'm based, as you know, in Florida. This inflation, as far as for what's going to happen with anyone who's running for office right now, it's what everyone's talking about. Again, to go back to what we started with, when you've got law firms and lawyers and doctors talking about inflation and the inflating salaries, how do you bring in a new class of doctors and lawyers? The expectation as to those starting salaries, things are getting out of control, and ultimately it comes back, in my world, to the client and the patient, and it's not good for them.
Right. So I want to talk about the governor, Ron DeSantis. Wins by 1 point. He's about to get another 4 years, it looks like. And the question is, will he run again? Here's an example of Ron DeSantis being aggressive by trade and by nature. Maybe you could tell me how the people of Florida view him. Cut 25.
I'm focused on 2022, but with Elon Musk, what I would say is, I welcome support from African Americans. What can I say?
He's South African. He was asked about Elon Musk tweeting out that he looks like he's leaning towards DeSantis. Can you give me a sense from talking to your clients as well as your peers, how is Ron DeSantis viewed inside Florida?
Well, right now I can just tell you where I live in Tampa, it's booming. Florida feels like it's a place where we have a really good economy going on right now. That is a reflection in a lot of ways of Governor DeSantis. You don't hear people talking critically about Governor DeSantis the way you hear people talking about the administration. And look, I'll be honest, you also don't hear people talking about Ron DeSantis or Governor DeSantis the way they talked about the president from the prior administration. He seems to have this ability, Governor DeSantis, for whatever the reason is, to be very objective as far as how a wide range, and I'm talking of a lot of the professionals I deal with, doctors and lawyers, perceive him. They're looking at him as, is this guy somebody who's doing common sense policy without all the other rhetoric?
And you mentioned COVID-19, and the governor was very aggressive about letting Floridians make their own decisions. How was he received originally, and how is he received now with those decisions? Because they certainly look good.
I can tell you what I find really, really interesting is I work with a lot of millennials and Generation Z. I don't hear a lot of people talking about this, but they do not like they didn't like the mandate. They didn't like having to have anything injected into their bodies that they didn't know about, and they didn't like wearing the masks. All of a sudden, Governor DeSantis seems to be having a real uptick in that group, which is not something that you traditionally see.
And a lot of people, where you are now in New York City, lost a lot of their people to Florida by tens of thousands.
And people, it's funny, and I'm originally from New York, people that are coming down from New York are talking, and they are not, it's one of my first trips up here in the last few years through the pandemic, they're not speaking highly about New York. They're really enjoying the time that they're having in Florida.
Right, absolutely. Some tourists are coming back, but unfortunately law enforcement is not empowered to keep us safe. 92% are concerned about crime. And I want you to have a good visit, but keep your head on a swivel, Brian. Brian Rotella, he's Genco Legal. He's a senior partner for Genco Legal. Thanks so much, Brian. Always great to hear from you.
Absolutely my pleasure.
All right, Tom Glavine next.
New from the Fox News Podcasts Network, Dana Perino, co-host of The Five and America's Newsroom on Fox News Channel.